This episode is proudly supported by Monash University, promoting the Master of Indigenous Business Leadership program. For more information, head to the link in our show notes or visit www.monash.edu/Indigenous-business-leadership.
Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mandanara Bales.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Monash Partnership Series. I'm Mandanara Bales, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to have a yarn with my amazing guest today. I am not going to introduce Bedi. Bedi will actually share her story, and it's something that we do every day. Well, not every day. Well, yeah. As Aboriginal people or First Nations peoples, when we come together, we ask the question, who's your mob?
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to connect with people and to find what we have in common. So if you are new to the podcast, also a big shout out to our viewers now on YouTube. This is a conversational story kind of, it's not exactly a structured interview. And I want people, whether you're driving your car right now, out walking your dog or doing your exercise, I want you to feel as if you're sitting here on the couch with us. So
please join us.
Yes, take a seat. So this is going to be an amazing yarn, and we're going to talk about all things culture, business, leadership, and the freezing temperature and weather here in Naarm. So I'm going to hand over to Bedi to introduce yourself. So, who's your mob? Where did you grow up? And a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Of course, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land here we are in at Naarm. You're visiting Naarm, and we are on Wurundjeri land. And I'd really like to pay respects to the amazing land that as a migrant, I get to be in and walk along and look cute in all the time. I really want to acknowledge, of course, your, elders and all the elders of this country. And I want to just pay respect to the fact that this was and always will be Aboriginal land. And I'm very, grateful as a migrant to be here. And it's probably a good segue to my story. I am a migrant to Australia. I came in 1998, bright-eyed from Egypt. So we are refugees. Me and my family, we came in. Most South Sudanese you'll find. So I am of South Sudanese heritage. You'll find a lot of us were refugees fleeing from civil war. So a lot of us kind of did this path of going from for us, Libya and Egypt. I was around Gaddafi times, and then we came to Egypt, and then we migrated to Australia. So when we came to Australia, my dad was like, "We're going to the fair go country." He actually had 3 choices. He was able to pick between Canada, America, and Australia, and he said, "Canada's too cold. America has guns." And then he said, "What's that last one? That one will do." So we came to this country bright-eyed, and the experience has been one of a lot of migrants' experiences. You come in, you try to adapt, and I think Australia has been great because I've really taken that fair go mentality, and it's helped me really go in there. Obviously there was challenges. I am a beautiful, dark, very noticeable black woman walking in a lot of the spaces that I've walked in through primary school all the way to high school, all the way to university. But I've always kept that proudness. I have my mum, who's a great role model, who's like, "Bedi, it is what it is. This is the space you're in, own it." And that's what kept me going through, any challenges I've had through that. And we can talk a little bit more about what are those challenges later. But essentially I was able to come to this country, graduate, Bachelor of Business. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. You know what? Studying is hard. Thank you. It is hard. Anyone out there who's studying, it is hard. So thank you and keep going. And then I was able to, not without its difficulties, and I can talk a little bit more about those challenges and how it allowed me to create where I am now. But essentially I had barriers trying to find a job after getting my Bachelor of Business. I wasn't able to find that graduate role that all of my, colleagues were able to find. And I really struggled to find work. And I only found work through a diversity program that a bank was offering. That's how I started my career. And, once I found that job, because I knew I was talent, although other people had their own hesitance, I can't see why. But, obviously there are unconscious biases. But once I started my career in HR, I'd say 12 years ago, you're probably like, how can she be 12 years? She's so young. Yes, I am young, and black don't crack.
That is true. It's all in the moisturizer, my husband says.
It's all in the genetics. That's not why. But essentially, I was able to start my career, and the rest was history. 10 years in HR, and then was able to create my own business, which is called DivTal. Got into entrepreneurship, and I also got into modeling, because after breaking one barrier, you couldn't really stop me afterwards. So
I freaking love this. So, graduated university with a business degree, started your organisation, and I know there's a beautiful other black woman in business with you.
Yes,
Do you want to give her a shout out?
Lorna Deng. So my co-founder and I both had similar experiences. She's a South Sudanese woman. She's a migrant. She also had difficulties finding work, and we found each other in the same diversity program.
Okay, there you go.
So we said we want to create a better experience for those there's so many people who have barriers finding work after graduating, especially migrants, refugees, also First Nations people. We said we wanted to create something different, and we are HR people. So shout out to Lorna, who came together with me and was able to create this amazing, passionate business that we love called DivTal, stands for Diverse Talent. And we go in and really are trying to break the barriers of creating a more inclusive future of work. Yeah.
So tell us about, how did you get involved with Monash? Are you studying at Monash at the moment?
Yes, I am. So I'm currently studying my Masters of Human Resource Management. It was right in the midst of my career where I've always been in HR, but I really wanted to get into management. So I said, maybe if I get also I've got African parents like, go get a master's. They never stop. So between those, my dad, who's an academic, who's like, you need to go all the way to PhD. I'm not going to PhD. No. But I was like, how about a master's? Nah, it's not for everyone. Yeah. It's not for me. The struggle's real. I guess
she's got a social life.
I really do.
Yes.
I really do. But yeah, I did go and do my master's because of trying to climb up the ladder in the corporate space. And I've taken my time with it. I'm still a current student in Monash, and really loving, studying and getting back into a master's after I've already done the HR career. So literally 7 to 8 years into my HR career did I start deciding to go back to my master's. And I think it actually makes the conversation so much more real and fruitful. And I'm loving it.
Well, you've got experience now to draw from.
For sure.
To go back and do your master's.
Yeah.
What has it been like being a woman of colour in business? Do you want to share some of your experiences or challenges?
Yeah.
Or even some achievements?
I mean, a woman of color in business is not easy. I have to say to you, like, I would say I am an accidental entrepreneur. I think women of color get into business for different reasons. I think you could be doing it for survival, right? Like, that's like our mums. Yeah. My mum's always really been a woman in business. If you think of a lot of elders, First Nations, like aunties, like, and my people like my mom, migrants, they've always had to be entrepreneurs or business people, although they didn't see themselves that way. But my mom's been doing business forever. Like, I'm like, what are you doing? She's like,
bartering.
Yeah, she's
cooking,
like ironing, cleaning, sewing. Now I'm cooking. I was like, what don't you do? So I think maybe without me noticing it, watching her and how she just found innovative, different ways to just potentially survive was the reason. For me, I got into business because of passion, right? So you wanted to make a change, and it's hard to make change in organizations. It's really, a little bit tedious, to be honest. And I didn't realize that I could potentially have better change as somebody who creates their own business and goes and uses all the knowledge I have plus the passion to create a business, because a business is about a problem and a solution. I saw there was a problem because my experiences told me there was a problem. I was able to find, even through research, of course, that the story is so similar. People are struggling to find work. People are struggling to find culturally safe corporate organizations. And I was in that space, and I was in HR.
Yeah.
I was like, of course, I got to start a business. But
I love the fact that you just touched on culturally safe spaces for people of colour.
Yeah.
And you've been that person in 100%. That organisation.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, especially when you're in HR? I have never had this conversation.
Yeah.
I've had it with a lot of black fellas that have worked in organisations where we know, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah.
Who are you complaining to? To non-Aboriginal people, and they could be good friends with the person that you're putting a complaint against. So, there's a lot of mistrust and distrust in the system.
100%.
And there is a lot of systemic racism as well.
100%.
So how do you navigate that?
It's not easy. When I went to the International Women's Day breakfast for Monash, I came to talk obviously about gender, equality. But I stood up there and spoke about intersectional gender equality and how, for me, people see I'm a black person before they see I'm a woman. Yeah. So how significant that is within processes and systems is, profound for me, because I can't talk about being a woman without first talking about,
being black,
right? That's what people see first. And I think when you think about the systems, and I said this at the International Women's Day breakfast, I said, some of you in these rooms, a lot of you are women, you're white women, and you actually own HR processes. And I said, this is where the systemic bias is not just based on gender, it's based on so many intersectional elements and the ones that we don't have representation of. So the first thing I said was, number one, HR is not diverse. HR is mostly, I would say 80%, white women. But also not just white women. If you think about intersectionality, a lot of them come from the same socioeconomic backgrounds. A lot of them went to the same schools. So you start at seeing why the system is the way it is. The policies were created for a homogenous group. So now you bring in, hey, we want diversity, you gotta love that line. We encourage everyone to apply. Great. And then they come in to your workplaces that you haven't tried to...
You haven't done...
Nothing.
Yes.
You're like...
You ain't got your house in order.
No.
And then you've got this black person or person from a non-English speaking background.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the jokes...
Microaggression, you name it.
Casual,
everything.
Racism.
End-to-end employee life cycle equals bias, because the system hides bias. The system is either too narrow, so it is not accepting of everyone, or too wide that people are being lost within the system. Okay. So how do I navigate that? It's the reason why I love HR. I do it not in a way to say, let's create a new process. Let's fix processes. Let's talk more about what's going on. Correct.
Let's review the processes.
Don't you feel like they're always like, how about we create something new?
Yes.
No, we don't need to.
Policy.
Another policy, another program.
Yes.
Another idea where we tell someone who is different, because you're different, we've created this special thing because you're different. Don't forget that. And we're going to tell everyone about it and celebrate it reputationally. No, it's all Band-Aid solutions to not wanting to go into the system.
Let's dig deeper.
Let's understand the system. So examples of that is I go in and ask questions around, okay, well, here's a complaints process. Who's dealing with that complaints process? Number one, what is the psychological safety? And if somebody says things like, I think this is microaggressions or racism, how do you ensure that you've looked at the evidence to actually look if that's actually a part of the process? I always say you see racism, and it's not really seen that way currently, but this is where I love HR, because I get to be a part of these conversations that are very difficult.
You're picking.
It ain't easy out here, I tell you that. But essentially I say, racism is like a sexual harassment case.
Yes.
If the individual says, the person who, it's a victim-centered approach. If the person says, I feel that I have
Been
sexually harassed or feel like there's a negative behavior
Yes.
here, your role in HR is to stay neutral and to understand where that's coming from. It's the same with racism, but we're not there yet because people don't see it that way. People are like, oh, you're just overreacting, or
yes, she didn't mean that. You took that out of context.
Correct. So this is the importance of not creating new systems. I always, when I say racism, if you look at it the same as you look at a sexual harassment complaint, they're like, oh, whoa, like, I mean, it's the same process, right? Yeah. So this is where difference doesn't mean new processes, and that's what I do at DivTal. So we talk, me and my co-founder, we're HR professionals. We see the biases, we see how the systems that have been created are too narrow and not broad enough, and we also see that HR teams are not diverse. Bring more diversity into HR teams. So if you're studying HR, and you're a person of color or migrant background of you, we need you, please. Also men, we need more men in HR. It's just very underrepresented. Yes. And I think HR is the way it is because, number one, you need more diversity of thought to allow people to start seeing things differently. But you also need people who understand the systems and processes are not creating new things. You're going into the system and getting people to see it that way. Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people that are listening and watching this podcast, I know that they're a lot, especially, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, my mob, are probably, there's a whole lot of things that are already resonating with me. And I always say to, people to call it out, to talk to someone about it. We don't have to cop this. We don't have to deal with it. We shouldn't have to work in an organisation where we cannot bring our full self to work.
Yep.
So what would your advice be to, especially a lot of the younger people that may be struggling with employment? They might be finishing your high school. They could still be in school.
Yep.
And just trying to get their first job. What advice would you give them? Or is there some tips that they should know of with your experience that you could share with some of the younger people?
I love young people these days. I don't know about you, but they got so much more voice than we could have ever wished for.
Yeah.
I want you to use that voice. Use it to find more information about the employer. We're no longer in this place where we're like, please employ me, please employ me. No, you have the actual power. Take your power back as young people, especially young people with intersectionalities. Understand that actually, I'm the talent coming into your space. So you're lucky to have me. It's a mindset shift. I know I didn't have that. I don't know about you. Did you have that? I didn't have that.
No, I've got it now.
I got it now too. It took me a while, a couple of years. But I think the great thing about the new generation is that you're able to use that voice, use the channels of information to find out more about that organization. You're able to ask the right questions. You're able to find if they are culturally safe through the way that you can find out more research, you can find out who are their managers. All that information is accessible now. Before it wasn't. You got in there and you're like, ooh, this is not for me. But I urge you to do that research about the organization first. And then once you do get in, again, continue to use your voice. You never know where you need to stand up and say something about what's going on in that space. Use your voice again. Don't let someone take your voice, and you have power. Yeah. I know the power dynamics are so large, but I think I realized now that I have a voice, I've always had a voice, but when I found my voice,
in different environments,
correct.
You would choose.
Yeah.
It's like code switching.
100%.
This is not the right environment for me to be my fully authentic, true self.
Yeah.
But in other environments, you're like, man.
Exactly. And if it's not safe, you leave and you voice it. So there are processes and systems, use them. I think one thing about me working in the Human Rights Commission is employee rights. The people who know them, they use them. So it's not a coincidence that rights holders, we call them people who are rights holders. So me, you, everybody else, you can start seeing the people who know their rights who come and have higher complaints. But then there's people who aren't utilizing their rights and aren't making complaints, right? They're not using their voice. They kind of, just people tell them it's fine. It's not fine. I can tell you as a HR person, if you feel unsafe in a workplace, it's not fine. And there are processes to deal with those processes. And organizations have a positive duty as well to be creating safe spaces. So yeah, definitely use your voice is probably my biggest, advice. Yeah.
And when it comes to higher education, like this is a podcast supported by Monash University. They have a Masters of Indigenous Business Leadership program, and I was part of the first cohort. And I have never been to university before. So to take that step for me was to, I've been in business for 10 years. I finished high school a long time ago. I wanted to build my confidence to literally take the seat at the table when it comes to board appointments. I don't just want to take a board appointment because people are asking me, hey, and there's a vacancy and we need an Indigenous person. I want to be able to use my voice if I'm going to take up that seat, right? Take up that position.
Yeah, of course.
So going and doing my Masters, I've got 2 subjects left, but it's built my confidence.
Yeah, of course.
And I feel that not only have I earned the position, I deserve to be at that table now and making decisions at the highest level when it comes to the boards that I sit on. How important is education for you when it comes to being in business?
It's very important. It's the only way to continue broadening your credibility. Obviously, having experience is very important. So coming back to be and wanting to be sitting in board tables is because you've built up experience. Education only elevates that experience and gives you evidence-based approaches, right? So it's very important. I know I look to education for many reasons, all the way from looking at my own way. So I know I use education to understand more about First Nations people because lived experience can only take you so far. So for me, as somebody who's led by passion, but education helps you broaden your whole perspective on everything. And then you come back and continue mirroring that up with experience and understanding people's experiences and looking at theory. Obviously, education is all about, this is why we go in, we look at it and go, this isn't telling the full story. And that's the fun thing about education. That's the new way you bring in your experience. So I think education is always a good way to continue elevating what you're building, and you've built so much. So I understand why that education went, I was already amazing before. Now I've even got a piece of paper that tells you I'm amazing. Which is great.
And we, especially when we're going for jobs.
Yeah, 100%.
You cannot get a job in HR without a qualification. I don't think I've met many people in HR roles or even in senior management roles. Maybe if you're coming in as an admin.
Correct. You can build your way through other pathways.
But we don't always want to be in these lower positions or entry-level positions.
No.
So getting a degree and doing further education, further study is important if you don't just want to be sitting at an entry-level position.
Yeah, and I always say, yes, and there's always exceptions to the rule. But if you want a good head start, having a degree, having a master's helps you. But if you only study and don't get experience along the way, it doesn't have the same experience. So I always say it's a balanced approach. I think the fact that I got my bachelor's went and worked for many years, came back to do my master's, and you would have done something similar, is an elevation. But I know if I didn't have my degree, maybe I would have even struggled more to find a job. But not to say it's the only path. So I know there's people who take so many different paths, and some people start as, working in call centers and work their way up. And that's possible too. Like, good on you. Yeah. I love people who sit next to me be like, I never actually went to uni. And you're like, but somehow you're exactly where I am.
Yeah. And
but you gotta love that.
How super intelligent they are. And you can tell why that they've been able to work their way up. And I feel that was me. I was able to work my way up, and a lot of people would say, oh, I used to work at QUT and deliver cultural competence training. It was mandatory cultural competence training. But I had no formal qualifications. Now, in the job interview,
entrepreneurship,
but in the criteria, it said if you have 5 years in this experience, 5 years experience and or a degree. And I kept saying to myself, why am I even applying for this job when I don't have a formal qualification? But I delivered the training at Blackcard, the organisation I set up with my elders.
Correct.
So here I am going, well, even though I do this, I have a business, but I don't have a qualification. So I started to hesitate on whether or not I had the experience because I didn't have a piece of paper. So I haven't
You've always had the experience.
Always had the experience. It's been part of navigating white Australia, especially white Australia, where majority of the people that interview you are not from the same background. It's usually mainstream or non-Indigenous Australians. And you're trying to, convince them a lot of the time. You're trying to convince them that you are as good as a non-Aboriginal person or a white Australian person. I'm just as good as, people with a qualification. 100%. So to be able to back yourself, you have all the confidence in the world. Love it. And modelling, you're going to have confidence to model as well.
No, you got to work. You work your way up to it, exactly like you said. You work your way up because if I went by what society puts me at, from all the way from desirability all the way to, leadership. If I went by that, I would not be anything. But you got to create. This is why I understand that confidence is so deep and within you, because once you believe you are that girl, that person, no one can stop you, really. So it's definitely an innate thing that you work on, because society does not allow that for us, for First Nations people, for migrants. Here in Australia, we're not there yet. So we really have to do a lot of that confidence building ourselves. And you've definitely done it, but it's not easy, I tell you. It's not easy.
And I'm just thinking in terms of being in business, being an entrepreneur, what do you see in terms of like the future? What would you like to see for the future of people of colour, women of colour, being in business, being their own bosses? What would you like to see?
More of us. Just more of us. We need to be entering these spaces. We're not asking for permission anymore. This whole, please give us a seat in our own table. No, we're creating our own tables and we're getting into spaces and breaking barriers. For me, move out of my way, barrier. I'm not really here for you. I've always been that person in a space as the only person, and you probably have as well. So I say we need more because we're better together.
We are.
And I would say don't hesitate, because, at least you have, one or two. And even if there's none, there's always someone not far away. So there's so many people taking the same path to entrepreneurship. So it's not easy, but we're going to be able to support each other through it. And I don't know about you, it's getting bigger slightly, but we're nowhere near there at all. So if anything, I just say, please join the entrepreneurship journey. Whatever journey you're on, please go ahead. Even if you want to go all the way up to corporate ladders. I know a lot of us jump to entrepreneurship because of how difficult it is to and
climb the corporate ladder,
and psychologically draining.
Yes,
it is for us, women of color, and that's not easy either. Entrepreneurship is a way for us to create our own spaces. And I'm part of the startup ecosystem, and that space is just usually me. I come there, I was like, ooh, pictures. Oh, everybody's here in sneakers and white tees. Oop, I don't remember you. I don't remember you either. But everyone remembers me. So there's a power in being different. I don't have to remember you.
Power.
Use your power. And our slogan at DivTal is your difference is your strength. So when you say to me, what do I want to see? In the future, I want to see more people using their difference as a strength.
Wow.
And you will be able to be everywhere.
Bedi, my sister, we could yarn all day.
All day.
And I'm pretty sure we will be hooking up
For sure.
after this and exchanging ideas, introducing people to each other, connecting. I really do hope people that are listening to this, that you've taken, there's confidence, confidence is within. That's so important because people can tell whether you're not confident or not. And to be able to use your difference as a strength, I'm pretty sure that speaks to so many people listening to this podcast right now. And if you still are struggling, then reach out to us. Bedi, you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram with your fabulous life.
I'm everywhere. You'll find me. If you want to find me, you'll find me.
I'll make sure in the show notes, we'll make sure that Bedi's organisation is there. And for any of our listeners, especially people that are looking to include more diverse peoples, First Nations and people of colour and from non-English speaking backgrounds, hit up Bedi and see how their organisation or your organisation can support you. So on that note, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. And even though you've been able to, it's so cold here and my toes are frozen.
No, I feel like it's warm around.
Yeah,
We've created a warm vibe because the vibes are great.
So thank you. Just literally trying to sit down and yarn with people and not be on Zoom, to meet people in person.
It's been amazing.
And have a good yarn. I can't wait to connect with you after. So thanks for jumping on the podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Thanks for having me. #BlackGirlMagic.
This episode is proudly supported by Monash University, promoting the Master of Indigenous Business Leadership program. For more information, head to the link in our show notes or visit www.monash.edu/Indigenous-business-leadership.
Don't forget to follow Black Magic Woman podcast on all social media platforms. To keep up to date with the latest episodes and news, head to blackmagicwoman.com.au. You can rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and please feel free to share the podcast with your family and friends.